Welcome to Focus SoCal. I'm Tanya McRae. Congresswoman Judy Chu was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2009, representing California's 28th congressional district. In 2011, Chu was elected chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, which advocates for the needs of those communities across the nation. Throughout her career, Representative Chu has been a fierce advocate for her constituents, championing issues such as health care access, immigration reform, and environmental protection. As the first Chinese-American woman elected to Congress, she has broken many barriers and paved the way for future generations of leaders. And Representative Chu joins me here today. Thank you so much for coming into our studio and talking to me in person.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a treat.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to know more about you. This is an opportunity for your constituents to learn about things that they don't necessarily hear in your typical press conference. So I want to start with, you were born and raised in Los Angeles. Tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up in the 50s and 60s in Los Angeles.
I grew up in South LA, raised in a black neighborhood, and my mother wanted most of all for me to study hard, work hard, and marry a nice Chinese boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
those were the goals in the 50s and 60s,
that
right?
was,
right,
yes.
Right.
Believe it or not, I did all those things.
Okay. Your father is Chinese-American, and he is a World War II veteran. And your mother was from South China. How did they meet?
So my father served in World War II. He served overseas in Okinawa as a radio technician sergeant. And because of his service, he was able to partake of the GI War Brides Act, which allowed for GIs to go and marry a bride and more easily bring them over to the United States. So one of the things that his father said is, you must go back to the village and you must get a wife. There was another reason for that, though, because the discriminatory laws of the time, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, reduced the Chinese population tremendously so that there were very few women. The ratio of men to women was enormously upside down. And so, yeah, he had only one choice if he was going to marry a Chinese wife, and that was to go back to the village. So he went there and brought her back.
Your family moved up to the Bay Area when you were a teenager, and then you returned to LA to go to UCLA.
Yeah.
You and your husband, from what I understand, are college sweethearts. How did you meet?
Well, my husband is from Hawaii. He wanted to go to law school. They didn't have a law school in Hawaii at the time. So he went to UCLA to get that law degree. That's where we met.
Okay. Did you take classes together, or did you meet each other on campus?
We were both active in the Asian American Studies program.
And you were very politically active in college. You were politically and socially active in college. I've seen articles that have called you an activist during those years.
Yeah.
What sort of causes were you particularly involved in?
So I was only active, though, because I took those Asian American Studies classes. And I discovered that it was the laws of this country that had discriminated against Chinese Americans and Asian Americans, and that those laws needed to have our input and needed to be changed. So that's what led me to say, I have to do something about it. And I got involved in Asian American issues, such as in bringing more resources to the community, because I came to understand that there were far fewer social services for our community.
Coming up after the break, Representative Judy Chu introduces a landmark bill to help keep families together as they navigate the U.S. immigration system. We'll be right back. While studying psychology in college, you also interned at a rape crisis center. How did that experience influence your advocacy work for victims?
It just really changed my life. I decided that I just had to be involved in fighting violence against women. And when I got to the California State Assembly, I sponsored the DNA Rape Victims Bill of Rights to make sure that DNA rape kits were not thrown away, because there was a terrible incident where 1,000 rape kits were thrown away by the LAPD, and that meant that never would these abusers be found. And DNA, of course, was not as extensive as it is now,
Right.
where you can definitely make some ties to cases that were from long ago.
You ended up settling in Monterey Park, and in the 1980s, Monterey Park experienced an influx of Chinese immigrants. And you decided to form the Coalition for Harmony and run for the city council. Tell me about that period of time.
So there was a very ugly anti-immigrant English-only movement in Monterey Park. There were many new immigrants moving in, but the old residents had a hard time with it. And so they wanted English-only books in the library, only English on the signs in the city, and then they passed a resolution saying that only English should be spoken in the city. Well, that was the last straw. So that's when a coalition of us came together to fight this. We got thousands of signatures on petitions, and ultimately the resolution was overturned. However, it became so clear that the people on the city council did not represent the population of the city. So that is when I ran for the city council and won, and served on that body for 13 years and worked to bring the city together.
In 2011, you were elected chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. What are the major issues that the caucus is dealing with these days?
In March 2020 is when the anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents started occurring, and it was exacerbated by President Trump calling COVID-19 the China virus and even Kung flu. So it caused certain Americans to just take their frustrations and anxieties out on Asian Americans. And as a result, there were 11,500 anti-Asian hate crimes and incidents. So immediately, we had to fight that with press conferences, statements, hearings, and finally, we got this bill, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, passed into law and signed by President Biden. And so that's when we embarked on this process to get a National Smithsonian Museum on Asian Americans in Washington, D.C.
The historic action of a formal congressional apology was issued in 2012 related to the Exclusion Act of 1882. Tell me the details that surround this action.
Well, this is one of the things that I'm proudest of, because as soon as I got into Congress, a group of national Asian Americans came to me and said, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was one of the most discriminatory acts ever in the history of America. Yep. And yet there's never been an apology for it. And so, yeah, we embarked on a 2-year process to educate the members of Congress about this act, many of whom did not know anything about it.
The Office of Management and Budget recently announced changes to how the federal government asks people about their race and ethnicity, including in the U.S. Census. In your role as chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, explain the impact that this will have on the AAN HPI communities.
So what this means, this OMB directive means, is that every department, whether the Department of Education or the Small Business Administration or the Department of Defense, has to break down by all those different categories the people that they serve and the people that they affect.
You're taking the lead on the Reuniting Families Act to help relieve the massive backlogs in our immigration system. What is the main focus of the bill, and how will it help families?
The main focus of this particular bill is to address the issue of families not being able to get together. And that's why we call it the Reuniting Families Act. But there is a 4 million people backlog. And it is part of our broken immigration system. Can you imagine? We even have visas that maybe were not used. They were allocated but not used in 1 year. And we cannot even reuse them in the future years. That's actually part of this bill would actually correct this.
Right.
But yeah, it would double the amount of family visas available. It would lift the per country cap. It would say that if an application has been approved, then that visa must be allocated within 10 years instead of waiting forever until the person is old and can't make it anymore. So far too many families are separated by this. If anything, we should be encouraging families to get together, because I think that when families come together, they support one another economically and, of course, emotionally. But families play such a huge role in making sure that everybody can be supported. If the parents have to work, maybe grandma can take care of the kids. I mean, it's that kind of thing.
Still ahead, Representative Chu talks about her efforts to expand the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, providing greater access to nature for all Southern California residents. Stay with us. In 2012, you called for a congressional hearing to have the Defense Department address hazing in the military.
Yeah.
And you did this related to a tragedy with your nephew.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, I will never forget. It was April 3rd, 2011, when my nephew was the victim of hazing, and it was in Afghanistan. He was in the Marines, and these other Marines took it upon themselves to kick and punch him and to douse him with sandbags so that he could barely breathe. That went on for several hours until he crawled into a foxhole and killed himself. I was actually contacted by people from all around the nation, parents who, and victims themselves, who were the victims of this kind of bullying and hazing, and yet the military was not acknowledging it and not doing anything about it. So I vowed that we had to change this. Then I asked for a GAO study, a General Accounting Office study, and they were so good. I mean, they really did a thorough study about hazing in the military. I do have to say the Marines finally changed their tune, and they began implementing a pretty stringent way of ensuring that they collected data, that they actually did something about the hazing, and that there was some remedy. We still have a lot to do in terms of making sure that there is accountability in every branch of the military.
Speaking of this kind of violence, unfortunately, January marked 1 year since the mass shooting in Monterey Park. What do you think needs to be done to deal with gun violence?
The whole community was just shocked, stunned, and fearful. That same day, that gunman was still running around. They didn't know if he was going to shoot others. I decided that it was very important for me to introduce a bill. You see, this gunman was mentally deteriorating. He had gone into a police station and said that his family was trying to poison him, and
he had a history at that point of mental illness.
And he was accumulating all kinds of ammunition. So one could have used the red flag laws of the state easily on him. And all it takes is for you to report to a judge and go through a hearing, and then his weapons can be taken away from him. But I knew that hardly anybody in the immigrant community knew about these red flag laws. So that's why I've introduced this bill to require that there be outreach on these red flag laws to limited English proficient communities, and on other gun safety measures like storage of guns and things like that.
We found a photo of you documenting 1 year after you had been arrested in 2022 protesting the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. My first question is, was that the first time you had ever been arrested? Because I know you were very politically involved when you were in college and in your 20s.
Yeah, it was actually my third time. The first time was when I was protesting for workers' rights, and it was at the LAX hotels. It was for the hotel workers.
What year was that?
That was 2006.
Okay.
The second time was when I was at the U.S. Capitol and I was protesting on behalf of Dreamers, Dream Act students. And then this time, it was just so dramatic because we were in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. It was right after the Dobbs decision, and there were hundreds and hundreds of activists that were marching, and 186 of us decided to get arrested.
Why is that still an important part of who you are?
It's so important for the American people to see that their representatives are doing something about the most critical issues of the time. And in this case, it was so shocking that this U.S. Supreme Court would take away the rights of half the people in this country, women, who had this right for 50 long years. So I knew that I had to do something to express my outrage. That's why I got arrested.
As someone who works to represent the nation on many levels, what are you hoping Congress is going to be able to do about that? Is there anything?
Well, this is why I introduced my bill, the Women's Health Protection Act, which would restore the protections of Roe versus Wade, but also make sure that states don't interfere with that right. So it is the bill that we need to pass. So this is the critical issue, because you can see the dominoes here.
Right.
The dominoes are that they're attacking mifepristone,
right,
the abortion pill, and now they're attacking IVF.
Championing environmental causes has also been a part of your legacy. As an advocate in the fight against climate change, you introduced the National Climate Service Corps and Career Service Network Act that establishes a new AmeriCorps program connecting people to jobs in the clean energy sectors. What are the goals of that program?
This is to get young people involved in good-paying jobs that will fight climate change. And it builds upon the AmeriCorps program, which was to get young people to have jobs that could lead to greater opportunities. What President Biden did is he implemented it by executive action. And so we already have thousands upon thousands of young people signing up, which shows their intense interest in saving the planet.
President Obama designated the San Gabriel Mountains a national monument, and your efforts to secure the natural environment of that area actually goes back to you and your family enjoying that region when you were growing up. What progress has been made in relation to that area?
Well, the San Gabriel Mountains are the jewel of Los Angeles County. Because of the San Gabriel Mountains, any one of the 15 million people of LA County can just take a 90-minute drive to the San Gabriel Mountains and enjoy nature and the fresh air. So we need to make the San Gabriel Mountains the best it can be, which it means providing resources. That's why I pushed President Obama to declare the San Gabriel Mountains a national monument.
What is so special about the San Gabriel Mountains?
Oh, the San Gabriel Mountains are such a resource to this very, very urban area, and I think that is what drew President Obama to this idea of getting nature to all of us who are stuck in the freeways and in our dense urban areas. So, yeah, it is something that provides solace and healing power to those who really need a mental escape. In fact, it is rejuvenating to many, many people who go up there.
My last question for you is, tell me one thing about yourself that people might be surprised to know.
Well, my husband and I love to travel, and we like to go to bucket list places. Okay. Places that are infamous, famous, beautiful, and that would excite us. So, yeah.
What were the last 3 bucket list locations?
We've gone to Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Okay.
We've gone to Bali. We've gone to Vietnam.
Places that are very different.
Yeah.
From Los Angeles region, for sure. Congresswoman Chu, thank you so much for coming into the studio and talking about the things that are important to you and that you're passionate about. I really enjoyed getting to know more about you.
Oh, thank you so much.